So as already announced, our magnificent keynote speaker this evening is Dr. Jemma Green. Jemma is the chair and co-founder of Power Ledger, a leading full-stack energy blockchain technology company. She has more than 15 years of experience in finance and risk advisory, having worked for 11 years as an investment banker in London, where she was chosen to help set up JP Morgan's Global Environment and Social Risk Management Office. While in the UK, she also received a master's degree and 2 postgraduate diplomas from Cambridge University in sustainability. And upon returning to Perth, she carried out doctoral research into citizen utilities at Curtin University. And that's produced some really unique insights into the challenges and also opportunities for the deployment of a rooftop solar photovoltaic and battery storage, predominantly within multi-unit developments, and also the application of the blockchain, no less, which Jemma is probably most renowned for. Jemma is also the chair of Climate KIC Australia, founding member of the Global Blockchain Business Council, and contributor to Forbes on blockchain disruption. And I think it's fair to say, Jemma, that you are a very in-demand speaker, so we're thrilled to have you here this evening. And I'd like you all to join me in giving her a welcoming round of applause.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the Property Council for inviting me this evening, and to Bankwest for hosting this event. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. It's lovely to be here at this Property Council event for reasons that will become clearer later in the story, because I have a particular affinity for property. And it's also particularly nice to be asked to give insights into success itself. It's true that the more people that ask you to talk about being successful, the more one starts to suspect that one might actually be successful, despite one's inner critics speaking to the contrary. So thank you for asking me here tonight. Actually, people never seem to ask you to talk about failure, which is perhaps a shame. We'd like you to come and talk to 150 people about failure. We've had a few people shortlisted, but your name came up as the biggest loser. So we thought we'd ask you to speak. But I say that failure is often the flip side of success, and I wonder actually if you can have one without the other. I think actually failure is a good place to start my story, so I shall start there. A few years ago, I was working in equity derivatives for a big bank in London, at a time when the triple bottom line in finance was becoming de rigueur. And if you don't know what that means, it's about being accountable for people, commerce and the environment at the same time. I really liked this new dimension, and I had a bit of a zeal for it. But like many banks, we were struggling to really achieve this in anything other than name, which was a shame. And I don't know how many of you know much about mining or the extractives industry, but it's a pretty dirty business. And we were paying lip service to all the right phrases and causes and processes. And over a number of deals that I worked on, I learned a few things. Firstly, in a struggle between money and sustainability, money always wins. And the second thing is that it always is a struggle between money and sustainability. However you say it, money is always going to win. So I actually felt a personal failure because my job seemed to be rubber stamping a failing window dressing process. I asked myself what I could do to achieve a tiny sliver of success in this area, and I figured that sustainability begins at home. And so I thought I would start there. So one day, I decided to try and introduce recycling facilities to the bank's London offices, which was about 9,000 people across 6 buildings. And after the shared recycling bins arrived, I was very excited until I saw people putting their recycling into their small rubbish bin under their desk, instead of walking to the end of the aisle of desks to the shared recycling bin. And so I saw pretty much this was pretty much mirroring what was going on the bigger scale, but it was business as usual with a bit of window dressing in the form of green bins. And I decided my project needed a part 2, and I called it Bin the Bin. And I got rid of all the bins that were under people's desks and put rubbish bins at the end of the aisles next to the recycling bins to force people to get up to throw away their rubbish or their recycling. And lo and behold, the rate of recycling went up and I became the most hated person in the bank. Staff started a Facebook page called Bring the Bins Back. And I was blamed for rats in the office. It also became a fight about time. There were people saying that they were so busy making money for the bank that they did not have time to walk to the bins. And so they left their rubbish on their desk. And we put the rubbish bins on the way to the toilets, and they said they were so busy making money for the bank that they didn't have time to go to the toilet. As I said, in the conflict between going to the toilet and money, money always wins. So we were back here yet again. And for me, it was a big personal fail, which I really only succeeded in making enemies in and creating a sustainability project that wasn't in itself sustainable. But it really set up a valuable thought in my head, which was later to become quite important. What if it isn't always a struggle between money and sustainability? How could we do money and sustainability so that these two interests are actually aligned? So that sustainable route becomes cheaper, not more expensive, and actually everybody would like to do it as a result of that. Well, if you fast forward a few months and quite a lot of doctoral angst later, I was working on an eco-village project in Perth for my PhD, and I realised that there were lots of houses with solar electricity, but no apartment buildings with solar, and that represents about 32% of the housing stock in Australia and about 45% of the new housing supply. And there were millions of square metres of roof space pointing towards the sky on sunny Australian days, and no one was putting solar panels on the roofs of these buildings. So from a kilowatt hour point of view, apartment, property and solar panels were a perfect partnership. One is about space on the roof that isn't being utilised, and the other is about turning that into electricity for the people who live below. The more space, the more electricity, the more people, the more electricity needed. It's a pretty simple equation. But better still, the more people, the smaller the spikes you have in demand, and it means that you can create a smoother load overall. So you get economies of scale. So the bigger the condo or the strata, the more manageable the electrical supply is. In fact, strata, the bigger the strata becomes, it could actually begin to approximate a power station or a city wrapped into one. And this is where my affair with property development really got going. I also discovered that the law that governs apartment buildings means that they can sell electricity to the residents without a retail electricity licence. Bingo, there was free trade going on internally. And I persuaded a government land developer, Landcorp, to create a microgrid with batteries and solar at White Gum Valley in the WGV project. But there was a big problem, and the problem was one of incentives. Landlords don't want to invest because somebody else, in this case the tenant, gets the benefit for the lower cost electricity, not the landlord. And on the other hand, tenants don't want to invest because the time to pay back the asset is longer than the term of their lease. Essentially, the important question wasn't a technical one, but an economic one. How do you transmit the benefits of an investment to the actual investor? And I sometimes explain this in terms of 15 people going to a restaurant for dinner together, and you don't really know how to split the bill. You know, do you divide whatever comes by 15 people who just had a starter and 2 bottles of wine, or do you carve up everything individually, which is quite tedious, and many people would lose the will to live going through that process. So I couldn't really find a way to solve this, but the solution emerged in January of 2016 when two developers in blockchain showed me what was needed. Blockchain effectively handles those sorts of lose the will to live transactions extremely fast, and effectively gave the whole project a crypto spin, which helped us to fund it as well. Because no one feels like they've been overpaid or they've been cheated, and more people show up at the party and it develops its own momentum due to the presence of an emerging market. So blockchain technology made it really simple to make people accountable for what they're using, all the while paying back the investment in the panels and the batteries. So this would hopefully encourage landlords, owner-occupiers and also developers to install it. There was something quite lucky about this concept, which I sensed, but I only really fully understood it a little bit later on. The model we'd created was very scalable. It's something that Bill Ty, an entrepreneur and a really important mentor for me, told me. He said, what differentiates a successful piece of entrepreneurship from a dud is the ability to scale. If we could translate this strata idea, which was behind the meter, to one that was in front of the meter, then we'd be operating well beyond the meter into cities at large, and it wouldn't be strata only that would be trading, it would be the whole network. Anyone with a roof or an electric car, a battery could partake in it as though it was a virtual strata, and by having peer-to-peer trading between non-stratas, just ordinary home dwellers and commercial electricity users and generators, we could create whole cities as though they were one big strata, sharing electricity between them. And this insight had implications for the future. I think that when a good project scales, there's often a social impact that fans the flames of change. This was true when the steam engine scaled up in the 19th century into something that started an industrial revolution. When you replace manual labour with hydrocarbon fuel, you enabled the steam age, which knocked manual labour out and installed a new middle class. We're hoping to flip things again at Power Ledger. And when you take big hydrocarbon and replace this with distributed solar panels, we can create another kind of social change. People in fuel poverty in islands could find their worlds changing for the better. Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, these are the places that might no longer need expensive imported diesel and expensive pylons which keep getting felled by storms and hurricanes. They won't have to spend most of their income on just electricity and water. The Puerto Rico electricity firm is actually $9 billion in debt. And for the developed world, at a time when electricity keeps getting more expensive relative to people's wages, we need a revolution here too. We need green and sustainable homes for everyone rather than just a badge of affluence for the top 5% of our society. We're calling this the democratisation of power, and the end point of this is the state becomes less controlling because we'll all be citizen power stations or citizen utilities. At the moment, our electricity system wouldn't look out of place in Soviet Russia. Everything is controlled from top down, and we see a transformation from this quasi-Soviet approach to a true market, and a true market evolves naturally as a function of supply and demand. If you think about it, our cities actually evolve quite organically, but our infrastructure is controlled by the state. And this, I feel, is a pretty big disconnect. If you look at actually the way that slime mould grows, it's actually how sustainable organic growth happens. And we see low-cost sustainable electricity networks evolving a little bit like this in the future. So in the future, when you're talking about the specs of your property development, you won't just mention the views, the transport and the square meterage, but the cost per kilowatt hour of the electricity there. And I think it will reflect how modern, well-managed and attractive property development actually is. Put another way, in the struggle between money and sustainability in the future, it will no longer be the case that money always wins over sustainability. Both can win and both can facilitate each other. And that's the potential of what we're up to. If there's something that I feel that I am achieving right now, it's probably this: helping sustainability and affordability become naturally aligned with each other. That's what was missing from my work at the bank and on those dreadful bins. So what's the lesson from this that I draw? I think entrepreneurs often operate in the space of making things less exclusive. Henry Ford grew up at a time when cars, and for that matter horses, excluded the middle income world and below. You couldn't be an average person and have average transport. It was either a bespoke car for the very wealthy or nothing at all. He made cars for everyone, and the only thing you lost was choice around the colour scheme. You can have any car as long as it's black, he famously was quoted. He made it possible to be middle class and own a form of transport. So what's going to help you all succeed? In the history of entrepreneurship, if the history of entrepreneurship shows us anything, it's that success is about finding things that appear to be mutually exclusive that don't necessarily need to be. If you can find something that looks exclusive or overly controlled and roll it out to the masses, that's actually what it means to be an entrepreneur. When you look around, what do you see that needs to be made less exclusive? What can you roll out or scale up for the masses? In my opinion, the people in this room who set their minds to solving these exclusivities will be the millionaires of the future. And when you've got going on one of these projects, please do invite me to one of your talks. Thank you very much.